Good.
Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Aquavide Uskava, fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton. Luncha!
Welcome to you, the viewer. Welcome to our fantastic panel. It's the After Dram. That means it's time to unwind. So put your feet up, grab a dram, maybe two if you have a couple would be good, and relax. And what's going to happen? I'm going to give you a quick recap of my early evening with Dr. Don as we discussed many a topic from his second book, this one right here, Blending 101, the Canadian Whiskey Masterclass. It was fun, it was informative, and I was drinking this, so it was very tasty. So what we'll do now, Jen, if we could, is we'll have a quick round of introductions. Hopefully you all have something interesting in glasses. And Don, Steve Lee, and then Dr. Don. So we'll do that. So Don, what do you got in the glass?
So we're going to be releasing this this coming week. It's our stout whiskey, which was we're very excited about this. We did 2 barrels of this over 3.5 years ago. One got released as a Stout Spirit. This is the first whiskey. It should be out by Friday if the labels come in, and that's what's in the glass tonight. And so far, this is the only bottle.
The one. Well, I'm getting a couple. Alberta Scott Society is doing a beer finish one, so that's done. No, this is matured. It's not beer finished.
It's a stout beer distilled twice and turned into a whiskey over 3 years.
Perfect. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Steve Lee.
Hi, I'm Steve Lee. I'm from Douglas Distillery. I'm currently in London, England, certainly tasting some whiskey. I picked up this, I've never seen it before, this random bottle of Imperial Stag.
It's
and
lovely.
Because it was blending night tonight with Dr. Don, I made sure that I got a blended Scotch whiskey for the tasting.
Thank you, kind sir. And welcome. And Dr. Don.
Hi, Dr. Don Livermore, Master Blender for the Hiram Walker Distillery, and I'm tasting our newest release, the Lot 40 Peated Quarter Cask, and still working on it from the first session here, but it's a gorgeous whiskey, and it's doing very, very well right now. So cheers, everyone.
Cheers, and thank you. And you have things to do tonight after this, Don, so it's good that you're not finishing bottles like I am. I think it's very responsible.
Thank you.
Very good. Don and Steve Lee, do you gentlemen, you were watching the previous session. Any questions come up? Anything you wanted to think about or talk to Don about? Dr. Don about?
Well, for my part, it was interesting, almost, I don't want to say validating some of my findings because my findings are very small and minute, but I remember we spoke last time about the single malts that I wasn't happy with where the single malts are going, and I wanted to get off the grain, and I wanted to go into like a sifted barley, and I really think that's the way the Scottish and the Irish are doing it, and that's the way we should be doing it. Because every time I work with a barley, I don't like the notes I'm getting, and listening to Dr. Don talk about it, it almost falls into exactly what I'm getting from mine.
Yeah.
Well, and if people didn't see the last one, so these are still the remnants of this. So Don and I did a tasting with Whiskeys Gone Wrong. And these were 3 whiskeys that were part of his oldest stock that he had that he didn't want to release because there were elements of it that he didn't appreciate. And of the 3, there was one that I really agreed with him. And 2 other ones, I was a little bit on the fence. There's one that I would have bought regardless, but Don he didn't like it. So that's what we did that night, which was kind of cool. It was the first time I ever talked to a distiller that wanted to throw out some whiskeys that he thought were repulsive and told us why he thought they were repulsive. So that was part of it, Don, because the unhulled, because it wasn't the clear wort on them.
You know, aside from the mistakes that we made because we were early distillers, I think it is the barley needs to be off the grain. It also needs to be off the husk.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. And then listening to Don, he was like going down the same path that what I'm thinking. And it's like, you know, the Scottish distillers, the Irish distillers have it right. The brewers have it right. I don't think we have it right. And like you said about bourbon, you nailed it with, you can tell when there's a lot of malt in the bourbon because it has that note, that flavor, which is not bad, but it shows up.
Yeah, it's not bad in subtle levels. I mean, I at a 5% level, it brings a little bit of a dynamic to it, but once you do 100% of it, it was wrong, Don. I'm glad I really don't share a lot of the information with a lot of people. No one ever validates it. Maybe you're the first person I've had validate what my findings were. So I'm encouraged that I'm going down the right path as well, actually, because it's just been in my gut feeling that's their key differences between whole grain fermentations versus using lauter tons and a clear wort. It makes sense when you talk to a brewer. They know that can be a potential issue to beer. Right?
And the stout as well here is done that way, and it was the best ferment I've ever had.
Yeah,
and it was the cleanest white spirit off the still with the most flavor I've ever had, and it makes me believe that is true.
Yeah. So, this is why I like this industry. Is you get people together that share their stories and share their passions and share their learnings, and it's a different industry. When you talk to our marketing folks, Don, you can't be telling people that. You know what? We tell each other, production people tell all the time. We always want to grow as an industry, and I'm so proud to be part of the Canadian whiskey industry.
Someone's got some Christmas music on in the background, I think.
That's my Uber Eats. That's what pays for bills.
Excellent. Yeah. Sorry, did you want to follow up on that, Don?
No, I can just say, like, I've been following Don, and Don won't remember this, but there was a Whiskey Live in Toronto years ago, and my partner Mike Hook walked up to you and just talking to you said, "Oh, you're an upstart micro," and he had said, "Yeah," like we hadn't even distilled yet, and you comped us into your Weiser's Legacy blending masterclass. So we got to do that class with you, and I remember thinking that was so cool. You actually gave us your business card too, and I've never called you. No. Right? It was the standard business card, and I thought this is so cool. I've never wanted to bother you, but I really appreciated that you were that open with somebody small like us. That we hadn't even started yet.
Yeah, I could jump in onto that too. If you're finished there, Don, I don't want to interrupt.
Yep. No, by all means.
Yeah, I could jump in on that too. And I don't know if you remember, we'll say Dr. Don and Don so that we know the difference here. I cornered you at the Victoria Whiskey Festival with a little bit of my new make spirits and said, "Hey, what do you think about this? And where's this banana note coming from?" And you tasted it right there and gave me some feedback right away. So yeah, I very much appreciated that.
No, this is what this industry is, and we like to pass the information on as producers. I know marketing has their own secrets and sales has their own secrets and everything, but as producers, because you never know what trouble you might run into, and you have to call somebody up and say, "Have you seen this? Have you seen this? How do you overcome it?" And part of the motivation, writing the books too. Passing that legacy, that information on to the next generation of distillers. I mean, I think we got to move as a group, not as a independent companies. That's kind of what my philosophy is on it. We don't succeed unless all of Canada succeeds as Canadian distillers.
Certainly,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm gonna bump up this love fest a little bit because Don and Steve did the same thing. They're giving you kudos, but there's other people giving both of these gentlemen kudos in their respective places. So Don's helped some distillers get off the ground as well. Steve Lee, you were the president of what was the name of the society where you're promoting the BC spirits?
Well, we have our own, not the club in BC, but we have our own whiskey club, which actually Dr. Don has hosted a tasting not too long ago, actually. So yeah, we promote not just our spirits, but BC spirits, but Canadian spirits as a whole as well.
That's good. Everyone's learned from somebody at one point in time. And Dr. Don and I were talking about this with his predecessor here with that. We talk about the stories. We talk about what makes whiskey great. And it's the people in the industry as well as the people you're drinking and loving with. So there, that's my 2 cents with the Love Fest. I'm thankful about that, and we're good. Steve Lee, did you have something else to ask beyond this before I start on my questions I've got?
No, I don't think so. No, I think I'll jump in. Well, early on, what I think which was really important, and Dr. Don said it before, and it's coming in the industry, and we're starting to see it, is transparency, full transparency of what we're doing. And you can't steal somebody's nose and palate and blending techniques. And you can write it in a book, but you're not going to steal what's in somebody's mind. and the full transparency in the industry, I think is really, and what Dr. Don's doing by writing a book, that just gives more full transparency and makes everybody better. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, they did a great job on it, and it's changed though, Steve Lee. When I told that story to Dolph, that when I first started, they wouldn't tell you anything internally, let alone externally, and how things have changed over my 25-year career. If you're not upfront and honest with your consumers, there's lots of other whiskeys to choose from. It's the way the world now when it comes to whiskey.
And we're seeing it actually a short walk here on Monday. I'm going to be wandering over to Compass Box and the challenges they've had with their full transparency.
Yep.
In trying to communicate that, I think, well, only time will tell, but we like to see that.
Yeah.
So I'm going back, Dr. Don, to what we were talking about before. Is that someone's phone number going on the internet? That's good.
That's
phone that number right now. Dr. Don, so go back to what we were saying about Pernod Ricard. I didn't push for an answer. You said you figured something out yourself, that it was better to hull it, to get. But I was wondering how much information is shared between you and the other elements of Pernod Ricard. Do you guys have a gigantic meeting once a year, and I don't know, secret handshake, and you start talking about?
I know the other blenders quite well. I look at some of them as my mentors as well.
Yeah.
Sandy Hislop for Chivas is fantastic. If anyone's ever met Sandy, he's great. The guys at IDL, they got a whole great whiskey team there. There's not just one of them. They got a whole band of them, whether they're distillers or blenders or coopers. No, I can actually, we don't meet, but honestly, we can pick up the phone and we do it all the time and ask each other, have you seen this? How do you handle this? I'm making this. What have you seen? I talk to their chemists. I talk to the blenders. I talk to the distillers. It's quite open. We do share information from that regard.
Good.
Yeah, I think it's foolish not to be honest with you.
Well, that's the ideal, I think, in my mind, is opening everything up. And it was stated below by these two gentlemen, the more that people know, the better the industry, the better the whiskey becomes. So let's not hide the secrets. And Steve Lee, I want to hear about your visit there, because I've loved them for a long time. And I like how they got in trouble from the Scotch Whisky Association for telling people what was in their bends and the barrels and everything else. I love that part of it. And I don't know. Have fun.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to go into the question. So, Don, in the case of your master classes, and when you presented the Alberta Scotch Society with us, I was always left with the impression that I should have focused more on chemistry. The distilling section was therefore a blessing before the chemistry-rich section. So it got heavy on me pretty quick, but at least I was able to kind of grasp in something before. But I got a couple questions. So I need to know the difference between your beer still and a coffee still analyzer. Is there a similarity between them? Because that's what was coming through to me at first, and then it seemed not, because the analyzer's not giving you the percentage that the beer still is. But are they similar somehow?
They're similar in principle. They're long towers, and you put steam in at the bottom, and you turn your liquid to a vapor, and it exits out the top. So you're separating on boiling points. That's what you're doing. Is at the bottom it's going to be hotter, at the top it's going to be cooler. Now the coffee still, I believe, has pipes that interwound go all the way up the column as cooling, so you get the kind of the rectification going off the cooling pipe going in and out of it, whereas ours just is at the very top when it's all hot. So there's probably some boiling point differences and probably separation differences between the two types of stills. When that happens, you're probably going to get a different flavor profile. But in principle, it's kind of the same thing.
Okay.
But because of the design, you're probably going to get flavor nuances that are going to be different from one another. I don't know if I've best answered your question that way.
You did, but I'm going to piggyback on it, because you do beer still and then you do the pot still. So was there ever a point in time for Wiser's, Pike Creek, Gooderham, and Warts where you did a wash still and a spirit still like they do in Scotland? So way back
No.
when was that ever a thing?
Not since 1955, anyway. I know the current design of the distillery. We've been doing whole grain mashes since that period. I'm trying to visualize the records in my head about their original stills, but I think they were doing whole grain mashes through beer stills probably since the 1880s. I could see information coming off our beer still getting 96.3% alcohol since the 1880s.
Okay.
There's a moment between, and I talk about that at the second part of the book when you read it next week, Dolph, that probably from the 1850s to 1870s, these distillers were really focused on distillations. They're doing their own nuances of the coffee still. Eventually, by the beer still, you start seeing it by the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's probably been the same method of distillation ever since.
Okay.
But they really, and I talk about I really don't think they had their fermentations in control. If you actually think about it, microorganisms weren't discovered until Louis Pasteur, and that was in 1858. Our distilleries were started in 1840s, 1850s, 1860s. They were doing things by the phase of the moon. No, really, they didn't know why they were doing things, but they knew their spirit didn't taste very good that was coming off their versions of their coffee stills or chamber stills, that they knew it wasn't good, and they were constantly fiddling for about 20 years to try to make it cleaner and cleaner and lighter and lighter. And that's why I always say traditional Canadian whiskey tends to be light and smooth. That's traditional Canadian. Now, Don's doing different things today. It's coming back, I think, largely because of the craft distillers like him. I think the bigger, bolder flavors are now starting to what consumers are looking for. But traditionally, people wanted light stuff because they knew it tasted like crap. They were distilling out their mistakes. They were really just trying to distill out their mistakes. And that's why traditional Canadian whiskey is lighter and smoother.
And your biggest competition was Irish whiskey at one point, and that was it. The two biggest ones, and they were both so light and so
and cognac as well. You could see actually cognac. Actually, in the 1870s, Canada went through a long depression, and you could see the Canadian government reacting by putting tariffs and duties on cognac and Irish whiskey coming into Canada, because that's how the government was funded. Actually, the top five. These guys have heard me say this before. The top five taxpayers in Canada were the distillers.
Yep.
But they were our competition. But at the same point, it was Canadian distilling. I mean, Canada was built on whiskey. Canada was absolutely built on whiskey. If you go back and look at it.
I love that. That's a great quote, and I think you should use that more often. But I'm gonna put you in a situation. I want you to think of this. So because your beer still, your liquid coming off the beer still 70%. Yep. And if you had a wash still, that's usually 20-25% it comes off. I'm wondering how your star special, because you said that's when it goes beer still to pot still, star special. I'm wondering what it would taste like if you did the traditional stills, the traditional wash still with, and I'm going Scottish.
Well, it'd be big, bold. It'd have all your flavors in it. If you could just do a wash still, it keeps everything. It'd be more oily. Our whiskey, we do actually blend the whiskey that comes just straight off our beer still into some of our brands today. It's very big and bold, and it's got the fusel oily content to it. The pot still just sharpens it right up. So, I mean, your shapes of your stills matter. I mean, it really does. I think you're going to get. I don't know what it tastes like, Dolph. If you're looking for the answer, I don't know, but I speculate it'd be a big, full body, oily, soapy style of whiskey if I just did one pot still of our mash.
Okay, I would like to try that if that ever happened. I would, because the experimentation's kind of what I'm about. I really like when people try stuff that it's not in their wheelhouse, and they're pushing a little bit.
I suspect if we just did a wash still of our whole grain mash, it'd be something like early Canadian whiskey. Probably what people didn't want to drink. It'd be moonshine, right?
Okay, all right.
And for our part, we early on tried doing single distillation through our still, which is basically a pot with a hybrid column on it, and it was just way too bold. The flavors way too. We had to go through a second time to clean it up, and That's what we came up with the theory that we need to put a cleaner spirit out, because we're only, like I've said before, we're between 3 and 5 years. That's our age statement. So I don't have time for a barrel to fix anything. I have to try and get it fixed in distillation. And so my whiskey can come off the still at 91, 92. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah. You're just reinventing what they learned back in the 1800s, Don. you basically relearned what they did. How things come full circle at times.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don, did you think at that point when you did the single distillation of actually doing another distillation, a really light distillation, and kind of blending them kind of traditional Canadian whiskey wise? You ever thought about doing that?
Good question. Good question.
Yeah. Sorry, what Don are we talking to here?
That's you, Don.
Okay.
Sorry, he's Dr. Don. We already established this.
All right, sorry. You know what? No, I love blended whiskeys and I love blending. And one thing I realized early on in getting a micro distillery is I will not have enough barrels to blend.
Okay.
Unless I make a massive amount of mistakes on a bunch of them and I need to blend them out with something else. So we always look at single cask work. Every cask we lay down, we hope it's going to be that finished product in that cask.
Okay.
And we're very similar in the same way. Is, you know, each cask has to be good, but as we grow, I think, and I think you have one, Dolph, where we blended a couple of barrels together. We've done it a few times, but we don't have the flexibility to go, we want 10% of this, 6.5% of this, 50% of this. You know, we just don't have that inventory supply. So we take a look at blending 2 or 3 barrels together to create the flavor profile. You know, we're not going to keep a little bit of whiskey off to the side. So we're kind of committed sometimes when we're blending those full-size barrels.
You know what, Steve Lee, we didn't talk about your 2 newest, because we talked about Don's, we talked about Dr. Don's, and let's do the naughty and nice. Just give us a little information about these 2.
Okay.
Love
So
these,
yeah, those are both our latest releases. Nice is we did some experimentation with our good friends from Sons of Vancouver. They had Amaretto. Nice. Our friends from Sons of Vancouver, they loaned us a barrel that they did a barrel aged Amaretto in. It was small and it had it had a tendency, just with our climate and where we're at, our hot, dry climate, of overwhelming the spirit. There was just too much oak, too much Amaretto. We needed to blend and soften that down. Yeah, so exactly.
I think that's it right there.
So we had one of their original small barrels. It was just a 30-liter barrel. So then we experimented with our 100-liter custom barrels, and it was still just really overwhelming the spirit. So what we did was we seasoned the barrel with some Amaretto, but we only seasoned half the barrel. So we are learning as we went along. This takes years to go through this process. So Nice has a bit of underlying sweetness there that's Amaretto, so a little bit approachable.
Yep.
So that's nice. So we call it sweet and innocent. I know innocent probably didn't make the Dr. Don flavor wheel, because that's not a very good tasting note.
I don't think I've memorized it, but it's not. I'm pretty sure
it's not on there.
Now, Amaretto's not on my wheel.
Yeah, innocence is not a good tasting. So naughty, which is kind of unique, because in BC we have to use 100% British Columbia grains in the fermentation of our spirits. One thing that we're really restricted is with peated barley. We just don't have any peated barley in British Columbia, and people have done very unique things to try and fuse peat onto already malted barley, and I didn't really like it. Some stuff that came out of the States, Corsair, some smoked barley. It just gave a really tarry, sooty note and wasn't given that depth of complexity that I really like in a peated whiskey. So what we did is I got some Scottish peated barley. On the naughty, we took that peated barley and pot distilled it. So we did a third distillation. So we macerated in the same way we do our gin, soaked the barley, and just did a pot distillation and carried that through.
That's actually smart.
Yeah, and then Gordon Glanz from Odd Society as well. We actually had on a whiskey panel discussion at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. We had a quiet discussion on how we could skirt around and be creative, not skirt around, but be creative within the boundaries that we have in British Columbia. And he did another infusion process with his vapor infuser. But
Yeah, he
that
did the gin basket
distillation
one. It's fantastic.
Yeah, gin basket
And
one.
that's
Yeah,
out right now.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
well, and he put that. Sorry, and Gord's going to be on here next week. He's on the After Jam next week, and he has that in a what's a maple syrup barrel as well. And the
That's
peat
right,
with the
yeah.
maple syrup is freaking fantastic. I offered to
Oh, I
buy
haven't
the
had
barrel right there. Because I had it right after I was at your distillery this summer, Steve Lee. I went to his in Vancouver, and then Sons of Vancouver as well. We did the whole kind of gambit, but that was one of my favorite whiskeys that I'd tried straight out of the barrel, and it made an impression. And I'm not a sweet guy, literally, or any. I don't like sweet generally, but it was fantastic. So
have you tried Dice yet? I didn't see if it was opened.
Well, you should see that it's open. Of course, it's
you've had
fantastic.
some,
It's
yeah.
all good.
There you go.
Of course, I had some. Oh,
So,
I didn't.
Just to round off Naughty and not dominate the airwaves here, I didn't like the distillate as it came out of the barrel, aged. I just found it had a little bit too much of a barnyard, too much malty was in the spirit. I wasn't overly enamored with it. We did some tastings with some people who have fantastic palates. So I actually moved that whiskey into an Ardbeg barrel. So that's been finished in an Ardbeg barrel. And after, I think that we were probably about 3 to 4 months in the Ardbeg barrel. Now we've just added a depth of complexity, added that little bit of smokiness. Now those two play really well together. So it turned out really well. We're certainly happy. And that one actually was a blend of a couple of barrels, similar distillate process and similar aging process. So we brought them together.
Now you saying you have it in the barrel for 3 months essentially, and that reminds me of something that Don said, and it was the first masterclass I think he said this to, and it was in the Banff whiskey experience, was that you get most of the flavor out of the barrel in the first 200 days. That was one of the most surprising things that I've learned about wood in a long time. And Don and Steve Lee, do you come up with the same idea? Is that what you have discovered when you're doing it? Because Steve Lee, you only put it in for 3 months, so you obviously didn't need it in there any longer.
Yeah, we talked about this on another podcast as well, and we've had the same thing. Once it starts, the longer it goes in the barrel, actually, we found on the peated, on the Lafroig and the Ardbeg barrels, it actually softens the peat. We're getting less of a peat note on it. So the longer maturation in the finished barrels doesn't seem to have a huge impact. So absolutely agree.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That you start getting aging notes covering up your peat, and you get that ethyl acetate. Yeah. Doesn't take long, Dolph. It's called diffusion. Diffusion is what the word. Yeah, diffusion is you're just bringing in the flavors real quick, and then it just ages afterwards. In general, I was thinking, listening to both Don and Steve Lee here, and it just kind of makes me proud as a Canadian whiskey producer how innovative we can be in Canada. Here's two different distillers doing many different things maple barrel, that was kind of new to me. How cool is that? How cool is that? that our whiskey category allows us to do and play and stuff and be innovative. I wouldn't want to be a blender anywhere else than Canada.
Yeah, we're fortunate.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with the like we were saying, 200 days, because I've had spirit in a barrel at 6 months and felt that it was pretty much there, and like you say, it's just aging after that just mellows it out. We've released 6-month spirits that could have been called whiskeys in multiple other places. It's just I exactly get that point.
Yeah.
And what would you get out of the barrel? Let's say you wanted it in there for 2 years as opposed to it. You say it's aging and mellowing, but are there notes that come out as well that are new, that might be different from the barrel, or is it just the interaction between that and the spirit?
Well, myself personally, I think that you get all the first notes, the caramel flavors, the vanilla flavors, all those notes come out fairly quick, and the rest of it is just calming down the spirit, depending on what the spirit was at the time, and depending on what the mash bill was.
And I think to build on that, Dolph, I think if you look at the flavor wheel that I have under the little section of age, you start seeing ethyl acetate and acetaldehyde being created in a barrel, just because of the oxidative reaction. So those two compounds are pretty potent. They're pretty powerful. So when they start coming in, they start, not you're getting any less vanilla. You're still going to get the same amount of vanilla. It just starts covering it up. It seems like it's calming down, but you're just covering it up in my mind. The other thing that'll happen too is your evaporative losses. So then you start concentrating up certain flavors as well as the barrel gets less and less and less in a barrel over time too. So that's the nature of making whiskey. You got to age it for a minimum of 3 years in Canada, but again, it protects the consumer, and yep. There's a reason why it's there. There's no shortcutting it. There's no nothing. You need to have enough rules to protect the consumer, but you need to have enough rules there to be innovative. That's why I like our category. There's just enough on each side of it, right?
Both of them?
Yeah.
Excellent. And let's stick with the oxidization concept, because Don, when we talk about Dr. Don, when we talk about the top filling that goes on in your distillery, you say you've got 6 barrels on a pallet, and you've got these not sieves but lances that go in. They vacuum out the liquid, the whiskey. At that point, it reinserts the spirit into it, and then it gets moved, and that takes 8 minutes. And I thought that was real, but I'm wondering, they never dry. And I'm wondering what would happen to your spirit if the barrel did dry and the remaining spirit in the barrel
ends up on the floor.
If
the barrel dries, it ends up on the floor. It leaks.
Right.
You can't keep them around. Maybe a month or two, but then they just start leaking out. So you don't want them to dry out. You wanted to keep them moist and wet as much as you possibly can. Okay. The other trick, though, if you're looking at finishing, here's my rule of thumb. I'm not sure if I put it in the book or not, but my test on it. If you want to finish in an Oloroso cask, if you want to finish in a rum cask or maple, whatever cask you want, and you're not sure you want to try the experiment, I always find it's about 1% by volume. So if you're going to buy an Oloroso cask and you have this spirit, I want to do that finishing, I find you take 1% of that Oloroso that was in that barrel and put it into 99% of the whiskey that you want to finish. That approximately gets what's going to diffuse into that product. So I just gave you free advice. Consulting advice I should charge $1,000 an hour for, but
it's good advice. We already wrote it on our whiteboard at the distillery at our last tasting. So
I don't know if it's free anymore because I tell people about it, but it's rule of thumb. It's kind of there, and when I mean that, it's about 190 liter barrel. Now it might make a difference if it's a bigger, larger, or smaller barrel. That obviously that would change, but on a 190 liter barrel, that's about the rough on it. And I just saw the Canadian Whiskey Smith here talk about the proof in a barrel. My point on this one is, I did a PhD in a lot of this. I haven't seen much of a difference in pulling out wood extracts. So that's that diffusion, or that first 200 days we talk about, and proof. There's not much I see that changes about changing the strength around. The only thing I'll say to that is, the closer you are to bottling strength, the proof you're putting entry proof in the barrel, is better for the consumer. The further away, it's just diluting it out, because you're just adding water at that point, right? So we some of our spirits, I go anywhere from 58% to 76%. So I do have a range of entry proofs for our stuff, but the further I get away from 40%, if that's the final proof, is just diluting down the flavors. So if you want to create more wood flavors and wood perceptions, get the strength closer to the final bottling strength.
Well, and I've got that
quote from him.
And so thank you, Teresa, the Canadian Whiskey Smith.
Oh, it is. I did write about that in the book.
It is. So, and here's the quote. I should have known this. This in the category, you should have known this. But generally, the closer the strength, the alcohol in the cask to the final bottling site, the more wood attributes the final. In other words, when whiskey is diluted prior to aging, it requires less diluting with water during the final blending. Now, I'm wondering though, and you said it doesn't make very much of a difference, but I was thinking yours goes in at 58%. And I was thinking if it went in at 70%, which is what is coming off your beer still, how much I thought the higher the percentage, the more flavor that it pulled out of the barrel. And I'm wondering if you played with this or not.
Yeah, I haven't really seen it. I've played with it between 58 and 76. I haven't seen much of a change, to be honest with you. Now, maybe if I start going above 76, maybe there'll be a change. If I start going down below 58, then maybe I might see something. But between those two strengths, those are what I did my PhD on. I haven't seen much of a change. You're still pulling in the same amount of wood, no matter what strength. It's just eventually you're just cutting it with water.
Would it be faster or slower, do you think, then, in that case?
I didn't see that. To be honest with you, I didn't really see a change of pace coming out. We have to sit it for 3 years anyway. Okay. So I don't know whether speed's going to do a whole hell of a lot for you anyway. The risk to it, though, in our site, I'm not sure. I'd be curious what Steve Lee's is at, but from us, we actually lose strength in a barrel. So if I start at 58, I've started seeing some of our older age rye getting out there. It's getting into the 40. You're going to get dangerously close to being less than what you can call a Canadian whiskey at too. So
well, but you would blend it away, Master Blender.
I would. So I would. And if I have rye whiskey sitting around for that long, shame on me. But yeah,
Steve Lee's goes up. We'll have Steve Lee talk about it.
Does your strength actually go up? Is it just dry where you are?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so we fill at 62.5% is kind of our standard, and our alcohol percentage goes up.
Yeah, I kind of thought
sometimes quite drastically.
Yeah, I kind of
the heat is playing such a big role for us here. The water's evaporating faster than the alcohol. Yeah. So we're losing 12+% a year on average, and most of it is water.
I figured that area of the world you would go up. I've found certain other distilleries in your area say the same thing.
Well, you both have the same temperature, but yours is a lot more. Steve.
It's humidity. It's a relative humidity. Yeah.
That makes the difference.
You got a drier where they
very dry.
Yeah.
Don, what percent does yours go in at?
Well, so what I do is I get some grain in and I distill it, and then I look at the barrels I have and the spirit I have, and it's like, okay, this one's going in at 52 or it's going in at 78, because I'm not going to leave whiskey lying around. I'm going to put it in the barrel. We do see our proof drop. So our alcohol percentage does go down usually. I laid down a brandy at 44% a year ago today, and I just pulled it out now. It was 42.3.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah, we're about the same latitude and relative humidity.
Yeah,
that's what I would find as well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
How that plays in evaporation. But the other thing too, Dolph, you got to remember, for us, it becomes an economic issue too to larger distillers, right? If I put at 58%, I only have so much warehouse space, right? So if I can get it to higher, then I need less barrels, need less warehouse space. So it's a little bit of a juggling act too. Not only recipe, you do have to make an economic decision. That's the reality of being a whiskey producer. I know consumers don't want. That's not the romantic side of it, but that's really reality.
Well, when you hear anybody in the bourbon business talk, it's going in at a very high percent, and some really, really high percent. And I was wondering if that's what I was equating to this situation. If yours went in at 80-some%, 70, or you pushed your beer still to go higher, it would be a higher percentage. Maybe you would lose less, or maybe you would lose more. I don't know. Or the water, when it comes out, it would be I was thinking it was going to be a stronger spirit, and then you would just add more water and it would cost less. I don't know. I was thinking about these in my mind, trying to balance these.
Usually it's warehouse space and buying barrels. That's capital expenditures, right? So that's really kind of the mindset where you kind of got to go from, and what you have available. And that's somewhat plays into the decision when you put away at certain strengths. Quality is one way, but there's also some economics to it as well.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is what I thought the reason was why you were emptying and filling immediately, as opposed to.
No, we don't want them drying out. No, we know we're going to refill them anyway, but you want to fill them as quickly as you can. That's the risk when you're buying some barrels from overseas, especially with the supply chain now, that when they show up on your door, man, I don't want them drying out. You want to fill them as quick as you can.
Got it. Well, I have a barrel here, and all of the metal bars just keep dropping, so I have to.
Yeah, yours are dry. Yeah, you put liquid in it, and you're done. Yeah.
I got it, and I think within 6 months the bars were just dropping.
Yeah, and that's what I always get bartenders like, can I get a barrel for my bar? Can I
put anything in? I could have put something in it.
And I'm sure you guys are getting to say, can I get a barrel for my bar? And the next thing you know, you go to the bar 6 months later, the hoops are all dropped, and the barrel looks like crap.
We screw the hoops in for them and say, here you go.
yeah, you have to. You have to. You get Dolph's situation.
Everything falling, everything out. It would have been a mess. It would have been horrible. Dr. Don, any questions for us or comments about the book? Because this book that I haven't brought in here that you want us to kind of talk about a little bit. We got 20 minutes still, but
no, I'm very appreciative of what I wanted to get across in the book. Like I said in the first hour, I don't think there's any books on blending out there, and it was a big mystery to me when I first started. And I think this is a good example of how you actually blend whiskey, and the mindset of a blender. I really appreciate the thought of coming on doing this. I think you've done a great job bringing up a lot of different things. Next week should be even more interesting if you want to get into the chill filtration and caramel coloring and things like that.
Yeah. Those are great topics, really, when you're in the after dram and same thing. Yeah, they really are. But
yeah, because that I talk about that in the second half of the book, and I'd be very curious. I think there's a lot of misnomers going out there, or maybe a little bit of, I don't know if it's what caramel coloring and honestly, caramel coloring has been added since the very beginning. Since the very, very beginning, it's nothing new. These have been going on as techniques as blending from the earliest days, and it really is part of what we do and the heritage of what we do.
Quick question from Teresa: are you going to start it in 2022? Do you think having people back, or is the Omicron just like throwing everything out?
I don't know. Yeah, I want to. I want to do it tomorrow if I can. So for those who are listening with the blending 101 courses that I do, so if you come to my distillery, I line up 140 different glasses of whiskeys that we have in our inventory. We have a range of various years, various grains, various distillation types. I've been playing a little bit with the inserts inside of barrels now. So I got my blend your own whiskey kit. It's over this shoulder here. That's where I put some inserts in it to give you a smoky impression to your whiskey, and inserts that give you a spicy impression to your whiskey, some wine barrels. So these are just 5 examples of things that I put out there. And you get to come and blend your own whiskey. I've got things now with hickory, which is very bizarre. I don't know if you guys played with hickory things like that at all.
Not yet, no.
That's bizarre. It smells like hickory chips. You know the little sticks, the hickory sticks.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, those are great. I don't know if they're great in whiskey. I'd be very curious what if Teresa comes to our blend, I'd love to see what her impression of those would be. I've got some black walnut. I've played with some Japanese oak a little bit as well.
Isn't it?
That actually does well with Canadian whiskey, I find. It does
nice,
very,
because
very well.
It's lighter.
Yeah, it's a good match. So, I mean, those are the things and the stuff that I'm playing with, and the stuff that I showcase at this whiskey or the Blending 101. I like doing it because I think partially is I get a read on what consumers are looking for. I think that's the most important skill. I don't know. I'd be curious what Steve Lee's or Don's comment on it, but you could be a skilled distiller, skilled brewer, and everything around making whiskey. But I think the big thing for us in our industry is listening. What are you looking for? I'm making whiskey for you, and you. It's not what I want, it's what you want. And that's partially why I like these Blending 101. So I get to try my experiments. and I've had failures. This tastes like crap or garbage, and then it's you know what? These are things that I really like, and this is where it kind of led me to the peated quarter cask, because I started doing that in whiskey blending 101. I did some French oak, and I hope that I can bring it back in 2022, and all you can come and visit me, because I think it's such a great experience to see how Canadian whiskey is made.
And
I see
that's
craft
the box right there. I'll show you.
The blending kit, yes.
That's the home kit.
He's like a good looking guy there. Yeah, so there's the home kit if you want to do it. If you can't make it, I still need to make it there. And I've done blending classes before from other companies. I'm going to mention them. And I've destroyed the whiskeys just because I'm a peat guy and I put way too much peat. You don't realize how much peat makes something.
So we talked about story. I know Steve. We talked about storytelling earlier. I think of whiskey on a taste as a story. And what I mean that is intensity. I think the way I try to blend with my favorite whiskeys, I try to have an even story as long as they can all the way through to the finish. Okay. My personal preferences whiskeys, I don't want to, it tastes, you get the peat and then it's done, or you taste the Oloroso and then it's done. I know people like impactful whiskeys.
Yep.
I think the skill of the blenders to get one that's just, you get a story from start to end. And I think that's what I think is a balanced and well-rounded whiskey. That's my definition of balanced and well-rounded whiskey.
I like them all though, because I like a whiskey that's young.
That punches you in the face.
And I'll go to a Scottish whiskey, so I'm not claiming one of because I got 3 distiller blenders here. So let's say WBC that comes out. So it's a 5-year-old from Ardbeg. It comes out. I like it a lot because it's a young whiskey and tons of flavor right up. Boom. But then it does come down and it doesn't have a finish to talk of. I like that because you're looking for a big punch of flavor sometimes. And sometimes I'm not looking. Sometimes I don't want to sit with my whiskey for 2 hours. I want to have a very memorable, very flavorful whiskey very soon, very quick, and have that impact. So I'm everywhere. But Don, I agree with that. But you're describing a whiskey where I want to sit down and enjoy it over a period of time. That's my idea. Mine for a whiskey that I want. So that's this. So where I'm having the Wiser Legacy, that's where I'm sitting and enjoying it.
That's why I love that whiskey. It has a story all the way through. Steve Lee, I'm not sure what your philosophy is on blending or view of whiskeys.
Yeah, no, and I think that's true. I think sometimes I like the single malts, the single barrels, because of the complexity. And this blend that I'm having right now is a story the whole way through. It just has that same characteristic. And I think blenders, I mean, we're so fortunate that they can make something, make a lot 40 batch after batch after batch to be consistent. I think that's amazing. Yeah. I think as small craft distillers, instead of trying to blend larger batches and try and do that consistency with, somebody like your education and experience, I mean, we're embracing the inconsistency. And we have an opportunity to experiment and do one-off barrels, to do a stout. We actually have a barrel that we aged smoked stout in that we're going to be releasing. It's about 4 years old. So we're embracing the consistency. So I think there's room for everybody in the marketplace. Yeah.
How about you, Don? What do you aim for?
My inconsistency is my game. I think we were one of the only distillers to release 48 bottles of cask strength rye, to only release the balance of it at 43. It was a great cask. It was a good one. And the best part was we had this big debate on, do we release the whole cask or only 48? And the 48 bottles only won out, and a lot of people really gave a shit for that. They really wanted more.
I hear you on things like that.
But it's funny, we talk about blending and I remember the first whiskey I drank was actually something called Barclay Square, because I could seal it from my father's cellar. And I still remember that whiskey with fond memories. I wish I could grab a bottle today just to relive it. But there was a BBC episode, a 4-part episode called Addicted to Pleasure. and there's an actor, Brian Cox, was the host. If you ever get a chance to watch it, he does one on Scotch whiskey. And he goes to the Dewar's distillery and they make the Cox blend. And they put like a fiery malt, and then they put like a pot distiller, a column distill this with it. And when he's finished and he tastes it, when they reduce it with water, he goes, I would just want to sit and make this last forever. And that's what made me think, if I ever get long enough in this industry that I get enough barrels to do that, that's what I would love to do, is to be a blender. But I'm so far from that, and I'm probably way too old at this point to be considering that. But if I ever get to that point, I would like to sit down and just blend.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to come and visit me, Don, to play around with this stuff. That and it is a challenge, is to get every flavor and to get it going along as long as you can and consistently as you can. And I love whiskeys like that. It's a lot of fun to blend if you can get there, but it's a lot up and down and storytelling, as I like to call it. Storytelling within the taste of the whiskey.
Well, as soon as I can make it out there and we can do these live, I would definitely want to come and do it.
For sure.
I was going to say you're nice and close, but I think I'm just showing how little I know about the Ontario geography. I think you're about 4 hours away from each other, right?
No, probably about 2.5, 3 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Windsor Devon, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it'd be something like that. 3 hours, 3.5.
Well,
yeah.
I do like the inconsistency for this. And Steve Lee and I were talking about this. He was going to supply the spirit, and we were going to have barrels, and people were going to season their barrels. Just the little 4-liter barrels, I think they were, right, Steve? And they were going to season it their way, and they were going to take the spirit, so the White Dog. Oh, what's the name of yours, Steve Lee? Sorry, I forgot.
Well, we call our new make spirit, we call it Virgin.
That's it.
So and the reason why we call it Virgin is because a new oak barrel is virgin oak. So we like to say that our virgin hasn't touched the wood.
Nothing.
So
that's what we were going to do. We were going to have a certain amount. And I said, maybe you make 50 kits or something like that with the barrel and the virgin. And then people would season their barrels themselves, however they wanted to season it. And then they would bring it back and we would judge it just to taste it, just to see. And I made sure that he promised me that I'd be on the judging committee. So I got that. So I thought that was good. But that's going to lead me to my next question. This will be the last question I'll be able to get to you guys, because I want to ask all three of you the amount that you char your barrels, because Don talked about his optimal being 2 millimeters as opposed to 4, and great charts in the book. The math teacher and me got in there. I like seeing how much you got out of the 2 millimeter as opposed to the 4, which was another thing that I found really surprising, Don, because you would expect the heavy char. You think the heavy char is going to give you the more flavor quicker, and it didn't. So if you could explain that without giving us too much, because like I said, people can buy the damn book, but if you could tell us just a little bit.
Yeah, so you can overburn a barrel, and you're just turning the wood fragments into carbon, and there is no right or wrong. It depends on the spirit that goes into the barrel. So there is a sweet spot to burning, and you can maximize your vanilla, caramel, toffee notes with a number 2 barrel. And if I'm making a rye whiskey, I'll do that. Now, if you're virgin, if you want to call it your virgin spirit, or your White Dog, or your high wines is very sulfurous, and your copper doesn't take care of it in the distillation process, you probably want to go to number 4.
Yeah.
Right. So number 4 barrels can then pull out your sulfur notes, and it does sacrifice the vanilla a little bit, but it makes the better spirit in the end. So there's no optimal. It depends on the spirit that goes into it. That makes some sense. Yeah.
Okay. So Dawn, let's go with you. Which ones do you usually use? Is it the heavy char, the 4? So I think I remember telling you we're talking about that.
We honestly found, looking back, Mike and I did a bit of a history on our barrels. 3 to 3.5 seemed to be where we did the best. But what we also found was when we went with the recharred barrels, we weren't getting the vanilla note. And I think in one of the first after drams, we talked about that with, I think it was Yukon, 2 brewers. Yeah. And we were noticing that we weren't getting the vanilla note, but it wasn't a bad note we were getting, it just wasn't the vanilla. But the new chars from the virgin barrels gave us that vanilla. But ultimately, we think 3.5 is where to go. 4 almost is too much, but I understand what Dr. Don's saying about if you have those high sulfide, that would correct it, because 4 is a lot more forgiving in some things, but it adds something else to the whiskey, I find. So when we did 4s, it was smokier. When we did 3.5, they were bold, but they didn't have that extra smoke note. And especially the Virgin was the best. Like we're looking at moving on to like away from, well, we lost our cooperage, so that kind of helped push us to the new char. So we're going to go with a new number 3.5s moving forward.
And Don, I'll relate that to an STR cask in a second when I talk to Dr. Don about that.
Sure.
But that's good. Steve Lee, what do you have for your char?
So we don't use any new oak barrels here. We use previously used barrels exclusively, and other than our recoupering to smaller barrels, and we don't do any STR barrels either. So we don't have a preference. We have a full range of previously used barrels, even stuff that we would get from Jack Daniel's that's just charred, or their legacy barrels have actually been grooved in them as well. So. Yeah, so we don't use any new oak.
Excellent. And the grooves, that's in the Sinatra, I think, as well, right? Because the Frank Sinatra for them, I think they grooved an extra one and then charred it, and that was.
It's a really unique barrel because, and to it, I think with those barrels is they're charred prior to being. They have those grooves cut in them, so we're getting some new oak notes out of that. We're not typically getting out of the typical barrels. So it's a really unique flavor profile that we're getting out of those.
Dr. Don, you don't STR, and you mentioned this in the book because it scrapes away the wood and you can't use it for as long. But I'm wondering, because I'm sure someone's done the math, I'm wondering how many less uses you would get out of a barrel if you shaved, toasted, recharred the barrel. How many less years, how many less fillings would you get out of these barrels?
We'll reuse the barrels so they fall apart, basically. But they go to different brands, and it becomes for the recipe. I find after the third use, they're pretty much the same. The other thing with recharring, I was going to mention that to Don, is that you can rechar a barrel, but I find it gets about 70% of the activity back. It doesn't completely get it, but it risks evaporative losses too. So there's a little bit of there's a risk to that because it thins the barrels. The other thing is when you rechar barrels, you don't get the lactones. That might be the flavor you're missing. That's that nice coconutty, sometimes that woody impression. Maybe you're thinking vanilla, but it's probably that. You can't reburn a barrel to get lactones. You can't.
It's been sucked out. And
It's an oil. It's the oil part of wood, and you just can't burn it. Other things you can, vanillas and other things and smoky notes. The lactones, it's a one shot, and that's it. And the first time you're going to get the most lactones into the product. That was part of my PhD as well. So I don't know if I put that in the book or not. I can't remember that. It's been since a while since I flipped through the book, Dolph, to know whether I put that exactly in the book. But
I'm here for you, Don. The answer is yes. Yes,
I did. Okay, excellent.
Gentlemen, we're at the 58-minute mark. I'm just going to go last comments from all of you, and then we're going to sign out for everybody. So let's do the same order we did before. Don, Steve Lee, and Dr. Don. Last comments, last questions. Don?
No questions, no comments. I hope COVID makes it so we can eventually head down to Windsor and do a masterclass with Dr. Don. I really appreciate being on this panel with you guys, and I'm really glad to see that there are things that I'm finding that Don was talking about in the first segment. It's like, oh my God, I wish I was there now. But I had a great time. And again, thank you, Dolph. Thank you guys. This has been awesome.
Thank you for coming on, Don. Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks. Steve Lee.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the panel. I always appreciate when Don's on because I pick up knowledge every single time. So I'm very appreciative. I love that whiskey blending kit. So much so that I went back after we were with the Ottawa Whiskey Guild and bought another half dozen that were left at our local liquor store. So to share with friends, because it was such a marvelous experience, and people don't need to attend the 101 workshop to do something
at home. Yeah.
Thank you.
Proud Canadian moment when I was in London here at the Whiskey Exchange, and that was seeing the dissertation sitting up on the top shelf at the Whiskey Exchange in London, the very, very top, and cool. seeing it up there. So I had a chat with the gentleman at the store, and I said, "You really gotta, I'm not going to buy that because I have some home, but this is a valuable bottle. You've got to get rid of it."
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's
somebody's
cool.
going to take it home and enjoy it. So thanks, Don.
You should have taken a picture. That would have been cool too.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
sir.
did. I do have a picture. I'll send it to you.
Good.
I have a
Do
picture.
that.
Yeah.
Dr. Don,
I'll
I know
send
you
it.
have to go. So any last comments? And
Yeah.
then you can click off before I do my spiel. But
Okay, well,
anything?
yeah, thanks for having me on tonight. It was great, and certainly sharing my book. Again, if anyone wants to pick up the book, jpwiserstour.ca, and you can follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and at CDN Whiskey Doc. Thanks,
Christmas.
guys. It's a pleasure being on with you. I love these conversations with Canadian whiskey producers. With that,
And
Thanks, Don.
I'm going to sign off. I do have to run, so
Okay.
I'll see you next week, Don. We're all good.
yeah.
And
Bye.
Cheers.
that, gentlemen,
Cheers.
is the conclusion. That's all the time we have. We lost a guest of honor. We're going to still talk a little bit, hopefully after. But whiskey friends, that's it. This has been a fantastic start to my early evening. I have another tasting to go to after this as well, which is really fun. But thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the panel. Thanks to Don. Thanks to Steve Lee. Thanks to Dr. Don. He was here. I like that he's really open. Just about anything you want to ask him, he's ready to answer for you. So I really like that. So join us next Friday. So not Saturday, but Friday, December 17th, around 5 o'clock, maybe 4:45, like we did this week, which is 7 o'clock for you, Don, in Ontario, or 4:45. And we're going to be completing our 14th book review with Dr. Don, Master Blender at JP Wiser's Distillery, and I'm really looking forward to it. You should be too. Final note: you don't want to miss a minute of any of these things. Click like, click subscribe, and gentlemen, hold up a glass. Give me your glasses. Here's to good company. Here's to good whiskey. Here's to fantastic conversation. And here's to seeing you all next week, I hope. Have a great night. Sláinte, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Lunch.